Please welcome Eugenie Birch.
Hello, everyone. We've been speaking a lot about places. We've been speaking a lot about technology and science. Now it's time to talk about people. So our first speaker is Brent Toten.
Thank you, Eugenie. And I've been asked to spend just a couple of quick minutes to whet your appetite for the panel to come about cities for people. And I thought I would do it by organizing a series of headlines, some of which are pieces that I wrote and some that others did, that really, to me, start to characterize what moving from a city for cars, which is what we've been building for many, many decades, to a city for people really means. And I would start with this observation that how ubiquitous the knowledge is about what we call the law of congestion or induced demand, the idea that if you keep building roads and lanes, people drive more and they drive longer, and the lanes just fill up. So the fact that this knowledge is now ubiquitous, thanks to things like social media, is changing our conversation from designing around cars to designing around people. And we're even at a point where we know that when you tear down the big car infrastructure, it can be one of the most powerful people-affirming things you can do in city making. So well over 100 cities have torn down their urban freeways that lobotomized their downtowns and waterfronts and created people places. And the real interesting thing is that the traffic actually improved as you started to move towards multimodal city making. That's thinking for people rather than for cars. And I wrote a piece that said, enough with this so-called war on the car, this bikes versus car attitude. The truth is that when you design a city around cars, it fails for everyone, including drivers, and drivers are, of course, people too. It fails for everyone, including them. And when you design a multimodal city, and when you prioritize walking, biking, and public transit, it actually works better for everyone, including drivers, which is why this lazy media and political narrative around the war on the car is so harmful to an intelligent conversation. And then when we start to think about the streets, yes, it's true that streetscaping is not the be-all and end-all of designing for people, but it does matter how you design your streets. And so we use this term sticky streets to describe streets that aren't just about efficiencies for moving cars or even moving pedestrians, but streets that actually slow you down so you start to linger and love your streets and your public places and think about them differently, not just as people sewers or car sewers, but actually as places, real places for people. And you can design your urban places and places like Manhattan and other boroughs for families, not just for singles and seniors. I still frequently am sitting on panels where people say, families will never move downtown. We have over 7,000 children in our downtown in Vancouver, where I planned, and that's about 6,900 more than we had a few decades ago. We designed for families, and the families came. But most downtowns and urban places are designed to literally repel families. And so no surprise, the families don't come. But it's a choice. It's a design choice, and it's a city-making choice. And when we talk about tall buildings, it's not just about how tall the building is. What I tell cities around the world that I advise is that it's about how the buildings land, it's about how the buildings are designed, not how tall they are. Now, admittedly, in Vancouver, we don't have anything called super talls to meet your definition. Our tallest building is only about 64 floors. But we're not afraid of tall buildings, just like we're not afraid of any scale. It's about how they're designed, how they land, how they strengthen the neighborhood and the community. So we've got to stop fixating specifically on height and think about design. So you can read my article on that if you're interested. And how do we do it? Well, Mitchell and I had a great talk about this a few nights ago. How you break down the silos, particularly in City Hall, but across disciplines, to have a common definition of success around city making for people that is about building a great city. It's not about your particular departmental silo meeting its metrics or meeting its data, because city making is a holistic and multidisciplinary process, and that's what makes city making fun. So I'll stop there, and I look forward to the panel.
Thanks, Brent. Well, That's great to hear these words from Vancouver. Vancouver's a new city. New York's an old city. Remember, we have a plan from 1811 that was not built for cars. It was built for people, but we did bring cars into the city. We've also been siloed, and we've also been not thinking too much about some of the things that Brent's talked about. But in terms of breaking down silos, let's turn to Mitch Silver. He's a planner by training, but he's running the Parks Department. Mitch, tell us about how you're breaking down silos and also how you're in the business of happiness.
Okay, well, I think I said that yesterday. I'm noticing all the looping pictures. I am not really the commissioner of parks, but the commissioner of happiness, because we all know parks really make people happy. I'm very pleased to join this administration because this is one that's committed to breaking down the silos. As you all know, there are a number of rezonings that are underway in the city, and city planning has taken the lead to make sure that all of the key agencies are involved, because it's not just about affordable housing or density, it's really about creating great neighborhoods. I've said many times that fragmented government produces fragmented results. And so at the onset, Parks is playing a major role in making sure, as we look at the density and open space go hand in hand. And we want to make sure that as we see that community urbanize and densify even more, that people have those living rooms, those public spaces where people can function. We all know that open space is very vital for families, for seniors, for mental and physical health. And so we just want to make sure, as we look at these communities together, that we're enjoying this very comprehensive, holistic approach that involves community engagement, but not just density, but it looks at all the elements that make a neighborhood complete.
Okay, so you're really looking towards working with city planning, who's the chief agency now that is charged with breaking down those silos and going back to its traditional role of looking at holistic planning. Now, later in the day, we're going to have a panel on the mandatory inclusionary housing zoning text amendment, but that's an outcome. What we want to hear about now is from Purnima and from Rafael, how we got there with regard to thinking about the community planning that would be welcoming to this new zoning text amendment.
Certainly. So, city planning has taken on the mayor's mandate about creating more equitable, livable, attractive neighborhoods throughout the city. So part of sort of our effort is, one is creating this zoning tool that helps us to create more equitable neighborhoods by requiring affordable housing in areas that we are looking to upzone as part of our neighborhood planning process. But we are looking to do way more than just create a framework for more density. To Mitch's point, we really are working under this administration in a very multidisciplinary, multi-agency way. And our first plan, the East New York plan, is currently in formal public review. But we've been working on this for 3 years with the community, and really very intensively in the last couple of years with the council member, with the local development groups and stakeholders. And we have brought in not just a framework to produce more affordable housing, but the plan includes provisions of a new school for 1,000 children as we bring new housing on. Revitalized and revamped Atlantic Avenue, to Brent's point, which is currently a truck throughway, across Brooklyn, and making connections from East New York to the south, to Cypress Hills to the north, by creating new medians, new crosswalks, new pedestrian ways, new parks, additional park space, not new parks, but improving the parks we have. We worked closely with Mitch's team to identify areas where there were parks that were basically asphalt,
parking lots.
And how do you actually make that come to life as we bring this community, to this new sort of attractive neighborhood? And one of the things we are very cognizant of is that we need to preserve not just the physical sort of buildings where affordable housing and people live today, but also the fabric of the community. And we are working very closely with everyone to make sure that preservation remains at the prime sort of center of whatever we do, even as we do this whole revitalization effort.
So Purnima's told us what this East New York plan contains, but what she didn't tell you was this the details is a 3-year process that came to these sort of suggestions and recommendations that are now going through ULURP. Rafael, tell us a little bit about the community's voices that were informing this. It's not that city planning and parks and transportation came in and said, you're going to do this, did they?
Well, it started off that way. I would say that the community felt as if they haven't heard about a rezoning coming to the neighborhood. So it's something the mayor announced, and the community was a little taken aback, saying, where's this coming from? But I think the issue there is that the people who've actually been working on this plan for the past few years are people who are naturally civically engaged in the community. So the everyday homeowner, the everyday tenant who goes to work every morning, comes home, is not really fully aware what's happening. I would say that the administration has done a great job in presenting their meetings and taking community input, but I think we can work better at reaching out at the day-to-day constituent in the community. So, let's do better mailings to make sure that everyone receives a copy. The Department of DEP can mail us 2 or 3 times a month to make sure we're paying our water bills on time. Let's get the mail out to our constituents so they can know what's happening.
So this is pretty sophisticated, what we talked about in terms of zoning and how this actually gets applied. Brent, how do you create a more public outreach program that's understandable to everyone, not just the civic activists?
Well, I think the starting point is to not try to do that when you're doing a planning exercise, like a plan or a zoning bylaw, because that's inherently boring most of the time, unless you're thinking very carefully about how to be more interesting.
To some people.
And city planners, I'm the first to say, we are mind-numbingly boring at times, even to ourselves, let alone to regular members of the public. So we need to have a quality discourse about city making that's going on constantly. And then every exercise you do, every plan, every project can draft behind that high-quality discourse. But when I go to cities and I work with them and I figure out that they're trying to have a first conversation about how all the complexities of building a great city for people in the context of a new land development or a new plan, God help them. They're going to get slaughtered because there's no level of quality discussion that's just going on constantly. In Vancouver, we built that discussion over decades, and now every project drafts behind it, so to speak.
So Mitch, you've had huge experience in this. You're sort of a missionary for planning and a very good spokesman about this. What do you do? And then I'll come to Purnima.
Well, the first is we recognize you have to meet people where they are. There are different generations that have different values, needs, and aspirations. You have to understand it. Older generations come to public meetings. The younger generations really don't do public meetings. So the way in which you engage must be very different. And then when you hold those meetings, the substance of it has to be very different. You have to be very creative, make sure you have a way of engaging children, seniors, families. So for me, that's critically important. But, the basic change is that in the past, we started this profession to protect public health, safety, and welfare. It was about saving lives and people. Planning house somehow lost track and got focused on place. What is refreshing the last 20 years is there now a new focus on people, and we have to hold our public meetings understanding the population, their differences, their diversity, so we can meet them and talk to them in a way that they understand and can truly engage in the process, whether it's parks or cities.
Give us an example.
Well, one example is what we're doing right now in our park equity proposal. A lot of conversations in the city, and equity means fairness, is that we had to take a step back and rather just having conversations, we had to look exactly where we were not investing in our neighborhoods. It turned out that there were about 134 parks citywide that really were underinvested for 2 decades. We went out to the community, we did a demographic analysis to make sure they were clearly represented, and we did a number of things. We had one-on-one meetings. We had outreach coordinators that met with schools and businesses, and we had online opportunities. And so we wanted to make sure that we weren't just listening to the people in the room, driving the conversation about what they wanted, but we wanted to make sure we looked at the demographics to make sure the voices that we're hearing are truly represented. And so that's something that we've done quite successfully. And when people start seeing these parks coming online, it truly now embraces the aging population, children and families. And so that's just one example that we've done here in New York.
Sure, Purnima?
So I think we've also, learned, to Brent's point, yes, zoning planning is extremely boring, extremely technical, and most of the time when we do planner talk, people don't see how it relates to their day-to-day life, their sort of what will happen to my street, what will happen to my
Until it's already happened.
house,
until it's
happened. So we really are making an effort to really go to the communities without a preconceived plan in mind, but really doing an open house to listen to what people want. What is it they like about their neighborhood? What is it they don't like about it? How would they want to see it improved? So more of an open town hall kind of focus where, we may be the zoning experts and planning experts. We are not their community experts, and really listening to every sort of level of that community. The civic activists and the advocates clearly make their voices heard. It's really trying to reach people whose voices are not often heard. And we are doing that through media. We are doing that through meetings. We are doing meetings in churches, in community centers, at whoever wants to invite us, we are there. We host our meetings, but we are open to going to anyone. We are doing meetings in different languages now. So in East New York, we held a Spanish-only session for people who may feel intimidated in a session that's largely in English, even when there are other translators available. In Flushing, we've done sessions that have had Korean, Chinese, and Spanish language translators. So we are sort of learning as we are going. We are also doing these meetings, inviting all our sister agencies. So you can talk about your housing concerns to people who can actually hook you up with those people. You can talk to DOT about traffic concerns. You can talk to small business services about small business issues. And we try to bring, we've done meetings with 10 agencies in the room. And
so this has taken a long time. It started with the Sustainable Communities grant that you got from the federal government and have worked over the years to do this. It takes more labor. That it is about place in the end. I reject what you said, it's not about place, because in the end it is about place, but it's translating what you're hearing into place, correct?
Exactly. That's where we bring our expertise.
Right. So, Rafael, does that work in your community?
I mean, it does work. It's not a one-size-fits-all model for every
Exactly.
single neighborhood. I represent a neighborhood that's very low income, a neighborhood that's been disinvested, hasn't received any investment from the city or state agencies for decades. So, we have a lot of underutilized property that needs a lot of capital improvements. But at the end of the day, it comes down to administration actually delivering on what the community needs. So, we have to make sure that the housing is affordable enough for the people who currently live there, make sure our parks and green space receive the funding that they need and deserve, our roads like Atlantic Avenue are repaired, and again, it comes down to...
So what's your role in educating the community?
Well, my
in
role...
terms of managing expectations.
Right. Well, my role is to make sure that what the community is asking for is delivered by the administration. And
What if what they're asking for is too impossible?
Well, if it's impossible, you have to be pretty honest with them and say this cannot be done.
No, who has to be honest?
Well, the administration and
Right.
the city council.
Okay, so there's an
themselves,
educational process that has to occur.
There
It's
is
a
an-
dialogue. It's a
Right,
dialogue. It
right.
can't be everybody saying we need this and other people saying you've got to do that. You've got to have a dialogue.
But we have
right?
to shoot for the stars, right?
Yes, shoot for the stars, no question. All right, last few seconds. I want 3 words of pithy advice to the audience. We'll start with Brent.
On New York?
On planning, New York, whatever you want to talk about.
Design matters.
That's
Amenities.
2 words.
Design, amenities, multimodal.
Great. Mitch.
You have to plan for place, but also people, and it's all about the experiences.
Too many.
Thank you.
Purnima?
Be involved in your community.
Okay. Great.
Administration has to mail my constituents.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. You've done a beautiful job. Let's give all of them a hand.